Travel isn't about tickets anymore. It's about permission. And digital IDs are already being tested to decide who moves and who gets denied. Think about that. The ability to cross a border, board a flight, or even ride a train used to be a right, backed by a passport or a ticket. Now it's becoming a conditional privilege tied to your identity, your data, and eventually your behavior. We've been told digital IDs will make travel easier, smoother, check-ins faster, boarding, no need for paper tickets. But that's the sales pitch. Behind the curtain, these systems are collapsing your freedom of movement into a code, a system where your ability to travel can be flipped on or off like a switch. And here's the betrayal. Once travel is reduced to a database entry, you can be blocked with one click, not because of safety, not because of a ticketing error, but because the system decided you don't meet the requirements. During the pandemic, we saw the first wave of this. Borders around the world collapsed into QR code passes. Your health data became your boarding pass. Without the right code, you couldn't fly. You couldn't enter certain countries. You couldn't move. What was pitched as temporary quickly became precedent. The idea that your personal status determines whether you can travel is now normalized. And it didn't end when restrictions lifted. Airports are rolling out biometric checkpoints. Your face becomes the ticket. The pitch is convenience. No fumbling with documents, no long lines. But once your face is tied to a digital ID, refusal isn't just inconvenient. It means you don't move. You either accept the system or you're locked out. And it's not just about borders anymore. These controls are creeping into domestic travel too. Trains, buses, and flights inside your own country. China has already tested this through its social credit system, where people can be banned from flights or rail if their score drops. That's not science fiction. That's a working model of movement collapsed into permission. Here's where it gets even more dangerous. Once travel is tied to digital ID, the power exists to revoke permission altogether. Proposals have already been floated in the US to cancel passports over political disagreements. Think about that. The very document that once guaranteed your right to move could become a kill switch controlled by algorithms and policies you never voted for. I understand the argument for efficiency. Digital systems are faster, cleaner, harder to forge. But efficiency without transparency isn't progress, it's leverage. Because once you can be locked out of movement for failing to comply, whether that's a payment, a status, or a political stance, freedom of travel has collapsed into a privilege managed by code. And here's the real betrayal. These systems aren't national anymore, they're global. The EU is pushing standardized digital IDs. The UN and the WEF openly discuss streamlined global identity. What sounds like cooperation is really consolidation. Passports used to represent sovereignty. They were issued by nations. Once IDs are standardized globally, your freedom to move is no longer guaranteed by your country. It's granted or revoked by a system above it. That's not security, that's dependency. A world where freedom of movement isn't yours by right, but yours by subscription. Travel was never meant to be conditional. It was a human right backed by law, culture, and centuries of precedent. But now it's being rewritten into a code, a system where your access depends on compliance. And once digital IDs are the gatekeepers, freedom of movement doesn't collapse by accident. It collapses by design. Subscribe if you want to see how every system we rely on, from housing to health to movement, is collapsing into engineered control. Would you accept the digital ID if it made travel easier? Or is freedom of movement too important to surrender? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below.